Caesar stood at the steps of the Senate house. Looking upon the forum, he thought of his life. Whereupon stared back at him a woman, Triumph. In her Caesar gazed at inexorable military achievement, and the extending of himself to heights only the gods were sitting upon. This scene was like a celestial light, though when he looked yonder and about, Caesar would see the same woman, sobbing, in distress and in great pain, emotional and physical. It were tragedy which stood about, surrounding Triumph herself. The dead eyes of friends, the saddened gaze of sisters and wives. Caesar's spirit was abate, his mind contrary. Pensive, he pondered the question, has my life been worthy of triumph, or has it prized tragedy? 7 years after the establishment of the Marian reforms, and about a year after the end of the Cimbrian War, a child was born into the family of the gens Julia, a patrician family with a deep history in Rome. Born in 100 BC, this child would be raised by his mother Aurelia. Unlike many births at this time, his birth was completely normal, without any complications. This child's name would be Gaius Julius Caesar, the same as his father before him. Julius Caesar, raised by his mother, would grow up relatively modest, unlike many others in the patrician class. Unfortunately, at the age of 15, Caesar's father, also named Gaius Julius Caesar, would suddenly pass away. With the death of his father, the opening of a new chapter for Caesar's life would begin, becoming the man of the house at such a young age. A youthful Caesar would get married to his first wife, Cornelia, finding himself in the middle of a popularis optimates conflict between the two great generals, Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla. For to me, every sort of peace with the citizens seemed to be of more service than civil war. Cicero. In the background, battle songs had quelled, screaming and chaotic fretting churned to a quiet background ambience. Fellow patrician bodies were desecrated, disrespected and rotting. Many heads split from the body like the soul when it reaches for the gods. Sullen troops had successfully defeated the Marians outside the Colline gates and began to enforce their political will. Part of this will was to do evil against a young Caesar and his then wife Cornelia, demanding of Caesar to part from her through the means of divorce. Yet this dictator known as Sulla could by no means force Caesar, either by promises or threats, to put her away, and therefore confiscate her dowry. Though, due to his refusal, he was pressured to flee by the prospect of death at the hands of Sulla's men. So the young Caesar would take a marching step to the Roman army. Before the marching step of the army called, Caesar would denounce the actions of Sulla, who would, knowing of Caesar's refusal to divorce his wife, attempt to put this young man to death, whom many believed was not worthy of it. However, Sulla knew the potential for greatness when he was around Caesar, perceiving many Mariuses in Caesar. Thus, Sulla gave a speech, saying to those defending the young man, "Have your way and take him. Only bear in mind that the man you are so eager to save will one day deal the death blow to the cause of the aristocracy, which you have joined with me in upholding. For in this Caesar there is more than one Marius." After the speech was given, men searched for Caesar, who, after hearing of the speech, hid himself for some time, wandering about in the country of the Sabines. Men of Sulla would get their hands on him, though Caesar would give the leader Cornelius 2 talents to set him free, and only then was the marching step heard ever the more clearer. Thus Marcus Minucius Thermus and Lucius Licinius Lucullus would find himself with one great ambitious young man for his campaign against King Nicomedes IV of Bithynia. At Mytilene, Julius Caesar proved himself. During this siege, Caesar played not only as an envoy to King Nicomedes, but also had won the bestowing of the civic crown. Doing so through gallantry, most notably saving the life of a fellow citizen of Rome. At the mere age of 19, Caesar had proven that he could stand up to infamously intimidating giants like Sulla, and that he had fighting prowess and bravery to the extent of willingly risking his own life for another. With these important lessons from the struggle of war learnt, an opportunity in Rome would open up. Sulla later passed in the year of 78 BC, and knowing that it was safe for his return to Rome, Caesar returned to his home city, a promising youth. Once back home, Caesar wasted no time in warm welcomes, getting straight to work, becoming a prosecuting attorney. He would be praised for his justice by the public, gaining this through his fight against corruption. Caesar would exemplify his desire to be a justful attorney by bringing a charge of extortion against Cornelius Dolabella, an associate of the severely corrupt dictator Sulla. Though much of the Senate was not ready for justice, especially not Sulla's optimates. Ill will against Caesar, he left Rome to improve upon his oratory skills. Dolabella had been acquitted, despite Caesar's charges. Incurring ill will upon him, Caesar knew that he had to improve his oratory skills if he were to be more successful and survive the current state of Roman politics, so he sailed for Rhodes. However, Caesar's charisma would have a chance to develop when he was captured and held for ransom by pirates. He was brought to the island of Pharmacusa, being held in custody for nearly 40 days. It is told by Suetonius that Caesar was full of vexation, which he brought to the pirates' attention, when he would often laughingly threaten to hang them all. At first, the pirates demanded 20 talents for Caesar's ransom, which Caesar laughed at and let them know he was worth as much as 50. With 2 Sicilian men, whom Plutarch mentions are the most murderous of men, Caesar, like a veteran general, demanded of these men to stop talking so that he may be able to sleep. While the pirates exercised and played sports, Caesar joined in without great concern. He would read aloud poems and sundry speeches he wrote in his captivity, which the men of a Philistine nature did not appreciate. To this, Caesar would call them illiterate barbarians. The pirates thought Caesar a delight, entertainment, mistakenly attributing his boldness of speech to a boyish mirth. At Miletus, Caesar's ransom was paid, yet a man of his word, he wasted no time and found men to put to sea, finding the pirates, defeating them and lodging them into a Pergamum prison. Though the praetor was one with his eyes on the money, Caesar took the prisoners himself and left them screaming in irony. The boy they thought was a jokester turned out to be of the most serious archetype. Caesar travelled to Rhodes as desired, but was prevented by his conscience, hearing the actions of Mithridates VI in Asia Minor, threatening Roman allies and territory. Almost as if he were already the leader of all Rome, he sailed to Asia, illuminating to those throughout Rome and to Rome's enemies, domestic and foreign, that he was one of the most promising Roman youths. A man who avoided the appearance of inaction. Furthermore, a man of greater ambition than anyone could predict. He depicted his own private army and made it a reality. He found a mere band of auxiliaries and turned them into a standing army, marching against the king of Pontus's prefect, crushing his forces and driving the threat from the province, saving the states loyal to Rome and gaining their allegiance. Such swiftness Caesar demonstrated his military genius to Pontus with such austerity that one would think they would never tempt Rome again. After a great victory over the Pontans, Caesar was made a member of the College of Pontifices, later returning to Rome and gaining the election as a military tribune in 73 BC. His victory over Mithridates presented Caesar with great opportunity in a military career, helping him in his political career too. Soon afterwards, Caesar's ambition to become a quaestor and as many professions before him, he gained the election of the position in 68 BC, though an unfortunate heartbreak would occur soon after. Cornelia, his first love, would sadly pass. The woman whom he gave up the wealth of Casutia for had passed during childbirth, bearing Julia, a daughter. Yet another dejecting death would fall upon the promising Caesar, his aunt Julia. These deaths hit him to the depths of his own youthful heart. He would deliver a full oratory for his wife and his aunt Julia. In this eulogy, he would speak with conviction, in admiration for his aunt and his ancestry, saying to those present, "The family of my aunt Julia is descended by her mother from the kings, and on her father's side is akin to the immortal gods. For the Marcii Regis, her mother's family name, go back to Ancus Marcius, and the Julii, the family of which ours is a branch, to Venus. Our stock, therefore, has at once the sanctity of kings, whose power is supreme among mortal men, and the claim to reverence which attaches to the gods who hold sway over kings themselves." With such an array of ancestors to live up to, Caesar picked himself up and served his role as quaestor in further Spain, which got him into many issues financially, though this was less his fault and more the fault of the period. The Res Publica had become a corrupt and constant debt mountain, where all patricians would bribe one another and get themselves into debt in an attempt to make it to the top. While working as quaestor of further Spain, Caesar would come across a statue of Alexander the Great in the Temple of Hercules. He heaved a sigh, and as if out of patience with his own incapacity in having as yet done nothing noteworthy at a time of life when Alexander had already brought the world to his feet. In like manner, as it is told by Plutarch, that when he was at leisure and was reading from the history of Alexander, he was lost in thought for a long time, and then burst into tears. His friends were astonished and asked the reason for his tears. "Do you think," said he, "it is matter for sorrow that while Alexander, at my age, was already king of so many peoples, I have as yet achieved no brilliant success?" Almost immediately afterwards, Caesar straightway asked for his discharge to grasp the first opportunity for greater enterprises at Rome, ending his time as quaestor. Caesar married Pompeia, his second wife, in 67 BC, before moving on to becoming the curator of the Appian Way and then quickly continuing onwards to the aedileship. Returning to Rome, Caesar was elected to the office of aedile in 65 BC. So soon in his career, he was already only 2 elections away from the position of consul, continuing his promise and his brilliance. Caesar got busy as an aedile, decorating the Comitium and the Forum with adjacent basilicas, and the Capitol with contemporary colonnades for the display of a part of his material. So great was his aedileship that Plutarch praised Caesar as having washed away all memory of the ambitious efforts of his predecessors in the office, all through his exhibiting the combat of wild beasts in stage plays, both with a colleague and independently, through lavish provision for theatrical performances, processions and public banquets. Caesar promoted himself to the people of Rome, gaining great support among the masses. The people noticed Caesar as the better between him and his colleague, though the colleague, Marcus Bibulus, a man who would become a great annoyance to Caesar, displayed his jealousy outright through an oratory, comparing his new opposition to the fate of the temple of Castor and Pollux. For just as the temple erected in the Forum to the twin brethren bears only the name of Castor, so the joint liberality of Caesar and myself is credited to Caesar alone. Such jealousy is illuminated through the actions of the people, which were to be humoured by Caesar, that they sought out new officers and new honours with which to requite him. Caesar's aedileship was hyper-successful, acquiring more support from the people and obtaining important skills and connections in politics. though he also made many enemies in the Senate because of his unpaid bribes and his open mockery of the current system's corruption, openly bribing senators and even calling out critics who he had previously bribed. The prospect of failure was unacceptable for Caesar. The death of Metellus, the Pontifex Maximus, an opportunity presented itself to him before the bribes could catch up. So he announced his candidacy for the office of Pontifex Maximus, which had him resorting to the most lavish bribery as to display openly and in a mocking demeanour the current state of corruption in the Roman Republic. The day of the election had come around, and the controversial yet promising Caesar left his mother. But as she kissed him, Caesar looked upon his caring and greying mother, saying, "Mother, today thou shalt see thy son either Pontifex Maximus or an exile." The contest was sharp, as written by the Greek historian Plutarch, although despite the contest, Caesar prevailed, making both the Senate and nobles afraid that he would lead the people on to every extreme of recklessness. A glorious electoral victory gained Caesar the right to maintain his stay in the city of Rome as the high priest, the Pontifex Maximus. Caesar was soon afterwards elected praetor, yet another political victory for the young Caesar. His enemies were still in machinations, as a scandal of the extramarital nature beheld his wife, Pompeia. Caesar divorced Pompeia at once, knowing of the political rhetoric that would be utilized against him if he kept her, so he turned the situation on its head, when questioned at the trial why he did such. Caesar admitted that he had no evidence, with his mother Aurelia and sister Julia giving a detailed and faithful account. Caesar then responded directly to the question, "Why then didst thou divorce thy wife?" "I thought my wife ought not even to be under suspicion." The end of his praetorship ending in such an unfortunate manner, he marched forward to the heights of power, now looking upon the positions of governor and not far yonder, consul. Caesar had still not lost those attempting to rid the Senate of his influence. They continued to harass his march to the top of Roman social standing. Yet, Caesar had the audacity to continue in office and to hold court. Learning that they were ready to stop him by force of arms, he dismissed the courtroom and, laying aside his robe of office, slipped off privily to his house, intending to remain in retirement because of the state of the times. However, when in such a dejected state, since looking upon the atmosphere of the carcass which is now the Senate, the people of Rome flocked to him quite of their own accord, and with riotous demonstrations called for him to recover his position, offering him their aid. Caesar held the exasperated and furious mob in check, telling them that it was best not to cause such strife in the city of the gods. The corrupted senators, as always, said this was wholly unexpected from Caesar, though it was completely natural to his character, and so thanked him for his calming of the rabble, and rescinded their former decree and restored him to his rank. Soon after, he became governor of further Spain in the year of 61 BC. While there, he raised 10 cohorts to lead against the Galaici and Lusitani. Caesar overpowered them and marched on as far as the outer sea, subduing their tribes. After pridefully boasting they would never be obedient to Rome, the eternal eagle screeched over España with a daring stare that would forever change the fate of the region. With this great victory, Julius Caesar paid off all the debts from the bribery he engaged in and mocked openly, thus leaving him with an almost clean plate. The year was now 60 BC, and Caesar returned to the Eternal City, so within his reach was the title of consul. That is what he would reach for. Furthermore, the political genius of Caesar was to be perceived by his opposition on the sidelines yet again, as he would create a union of 3 influential Roman figures, the triumvirate. First and foremost, he courted the goodwill of Gnaeus Pompeius, continuing to patch up peace between Pompeius and Marcus Crassus, to gain another ally in Crassus. Caesar demonstrated the role of the triumvirate and his role within it by maintaining that no step should be taken in public affairs which did not suit any one of the three. In his march to the position of consul, many senators had been won over by Caesar's attentions. Conniving and hate-filled men like Cato spent their time consuming the day in speaking, in an attempt to prevent Caesar from gaining the consulship. But nobody could prevent the reign of the triumvirate. Concentrating their united strength upon himself, Caesar and his new friends succeeded in electing one another. Caesar had reconciled two political rivals and in doing so elected himself consul. Rome was changing, though many would not recognize how different this change was, they would by the end of his second stay. 59 BC was the beginning of the era of Caesar. To begin his era, Caesar would put through agrarian and land reforms. The agrarian and land reform he put through in 59 BC built intensity between the land-owning aristocracy of Rome and the poorer citizen aristocracy of Rome. He took from the abundance of the already bountiful and redistributed these lands to 20,000 Roman citizens with more than 3 children. Though restricted to Campania, this illuminated a pathway for the future of Caesar's love of not just the idea of Rome, but the people of Rome. Natural to their conniving archetype, men like Bibulus made complaint in the Senate regarding the policies of Caesar. However, such opposition of Caesar would be in a pitch of desperation, as they were given the same maltreatment they gave to their fellow citizens, Bibulus not leaving his house from that time until the end of Caesar's term. Before these laws were put through, Caesar was threatened with the sword. In response, he gathered his fellow triumvirates to the Senate, asking them if they approved his laws. This power play made sure that the land redistributions went through, however, also, though not mentioned explicitly, made Caesar further popular with sundry witty fellows, as Suetonius writes. These fellows humorously took out Bibulus's name in testamentary documents, instead writing in his place, "Done in the consulship of Julius and Caesar." Caesar was so dominant over Bibulus and his opposition's attempted interference that the saying on everyone's lips was, "In Caesar's year, not Bibulus's, an act took place of late, for naught do I remember done in Bibulus's consulate." Though less influential, Caesar's legislation also ratified Pompey's acts in the East and relieved the publicans from a third part of their obligation or their taxes, showing the public a forgiving and merciful figure. During this time, Caesar remarried Calpurnia, who was the daughter of the man to be consul in 58 BC. Caesar looked upon the year of success with greater ambition. He wished for that which was greater than any Roman figure before him. Receiving Cisalpine Gaul with the addition of Illyricum was nothing but a singular step towards eternity for him. The fear placed in the hearts of the Senate led to his taking of Gallia Comata too. The Senate fearing the people would give him this also, regardless of their decision. War was brewing itself, not a cup nor a bowl, but a pool of the greatest clashes between Celt and Latin, of the steel masters and the practical geniuses, of the deepest blood, of ambush and head-to-head. This war would define the legacy of Caesar. It would be his crowning achievement, an accomplishment of blood and steel that would never be observed in history ever again. The men of Gaul who once sacked the eternal city of Rome, who had been stabbing the side of Rome with a spear, these men shuddered at what was to come. The saviour of Rome struck into Gaul.